Minister Nick Clegg and all the previous hearings online at cspan.org. More debate is expected today on the Farm and Food Programs bill. Votes on a pair of amendments are expected, one offered by New Hampshire Democrat Jeanne Shaheen, the other from Kentucky Republican Rand Paul. Now, live to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal God, give us today the measure of grace we need to obtain your promises. Lead our lawmakers to so embrace these promises that they will accept your guidance, obey your word, and walk in your way. Lord, give them the grace so to run that they may reach their goal, and so keep the faith that they may be true to you to the very end. Make them wise with your wisdom, strong with your strength, and pure with your holiness. We pray in your sacred name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., June 13, 2012. To the Senate, under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Kirsten E. Gillibrand, a senator from the state of New York, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Madam President,
Leader.
I move to proceed to count number 250, S. 1940.
Clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to counter number 250, S. 1940, a bill to amend the National Flood Insurance Act of 1968 and so forth, and for other purposes.
Madam President, the Senate will continue to debate the Farm Bill today. We have a couple of votes lined up. We expect to have those this morning. Last week, in a moment of candor, House Republicans, led by Representative Cantor, admitted they've given up legislating until after the election. Although there's far more work to be done, they have said, we're going to have a timeout. There's so much to be done, I repeat, especially building on 27 straight months of private sector job growth. Republicans in the House are lurching from one recess to the next recess, long recess. They don't take short ones. They take long ones. They take them regularly. Last week's unscripted moment was a window in today's Republican Party, a party that obviously cares more about winning elections than creating jobs. Then a couple of days ago, we got another frank assessment of the Republican agenda. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush said Monday that his father, George H.W. Bush, and Ronald Reagan would not fit in today's Republican Party. And he went on to elaborate about some of the issues that they are simply headed in the wrong direction. Governor Bush said today's GOP is defined by, quote, an orthodoxy that doesn't allow for disagreement, end of quote. He's right. The Republican Party no longer has room for moderates or anyone unwilling to march in lockstep with the radical Tea Party. That's apparent every day on Capitol Hill, more so in the House than in the Senate, but it's now infected the Senate. It was obvious that from the first weeks of this Congress, the House had was taken over by extremists with no desire to work for the sake of the economy and no concept of the meaning of compromise. And, Madam President, legislation is the art of compromise. But over the last year and a half, it's become clear that Republicans in the Senate are enthralled to the Tea Party. We see the extremism in this chamber, I've just mentioned that, where Republicans have blocked or stalled most every jobs creation measure that we've brought to the floor. And we see it on the campaign trail, where Mitt Romney told a crowd he opposes hiring more teachers, firefighters, and police officers. Putting more teachers in the classroom used to be a goal Democrats and Republicans could agree on. But, Madam President, all over the country, things are happening just like happened in Nevada a couple of days ago. When, let's see, it must be about the third or fourth largest school district now in the country, the Clark County School District. Well more than 300,000 students indicated they were going to lay off 1,000 teachers. Well, they were able to, because they're not filling some positions because of retirements, they were able to have to only lay off about 400 and some odd people. It's happening all over the country. Sending more cops out on patrol used to be something that Joe Biden, I can remember when he was down here fighting for his cops program. Police departments in Nevada love the opportunity to get more people on the street. And that's the way it was all over the country. We used to fight to get more cops out. Now we're doing everything we can to stop the layoffs. And we can't do enough because we can't get a bill passed over here to help. Hiring more brave men and women to fight fires, save lives used to be a goal Democrats and Republicans could agree. Not now. There's, because of global warming, there are fires raging all over the West. Like Senator Bingaman yesterday from New Mexico. That fire in New Mexico is 400,000 acres. And he said we have another fire that's broken out of only 40,000 acres. In the news this morning out of Colorado, one person killed, scores of buildings, homes burned to the ground. The tankers that they're using to fight these fires are old. One of them crashed in Nevada last week, killing the pilots. But today's radical Republicans have another agenda. Not hiring more cops, not doing something to stop the teacher layoffs, but their goal is to drag down the economy because it's good for their politics. They believe the more horrible the economy is, the better off they're going to be in November. They love bad news. But we still have the fact that even though there were more than 8 million jobs lost in the Bush administration, we've been fortunate to bring back 4.3 million of those jobs. But we could have done so much more with the jobs measures we brought before this body that were lost on procedural grounds over here. Yesterday, Governor Bush said his father and President Reagan, neither of whom could win a Republican primary today, both, quote, sacrificed political points for good public policy. And I believe that. I was not a pal of Ronald Reagan's. I met him and worked with him. But Paul Laxalt, who retired and I ran for his spot, was his pal, his friend. And Ronald Reagan would not put up with what's going on here today because there's no question that Ronald Reagan, country came first, not elections. I have great admiration for First President Bush. I have, as my prized possessions, a couple of handwritten notes that he wrote to me. He would not put up with what's going on today. He was a pragmatist. He wanted to get things done for our country. He wasn't an ideologue. He was conservative, and certainly no one's better qualified to be president than the first Bush. congressman, head of the CIA, head of the Republican National Committee, vice president, ambassador to China. He was interested in his country, not elections. He was a Republican, but you could work with him. Today's Republicans aren't interested in good policy. And obviously, they aren't interested in creating jobs. They're too obsessed with defeating President Obama. That's their number one goal, but don't take my word for it, Madam President. The minority leader said so himself. This is what he said. The single most important thing we want to achieve is for President Obama to be a one-term president. That's a quote. America is battling its way back from the greatest recession since the Great Depression. And although we've created 4.3 million private sector jobs, there's so much more to be done. I was just left a meeting with people interested in infrastructure. We have 70,000 bridges in America that need repair and replacement. Not 700, not 7,000, but 70,000. And the highway bill is hung up over in the house someplace. They aren't focused on jobs. They've been too busy checking the political scoreboard. Would the chair announce the business of the day?
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the following hour will be equally divided and controlled between two leaders or their designees, with the Republicans controlling the first half and the majority controlling the final half.
Mr. Acock.
Leader.
I ask consent that further proceedings on the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Tomorrow the President plans to deliver a speech to once again tout his favored approach to the economy. I say that because aides to the President say we shouldn't expect much new in the speech. We can expect more of the same, more government, more debt, and higher taxes to pay for it all. Now, according to news reports, some Democrats are starting to get a little wary of this approach. A number of folks who worked in the Clinton administration have suggested something more positive. But others are pleading with the President to double down on the message that government is the answer. So far, it appears as though the hard left wing of the party has the upper hand. As liberal columnist E.J. Dionne suggested recently in the Washington Post, quote, "Let's turn Reagan's declaration on its head. Opposition to government isn't the solution. Opposition to government was and remains the problem," according to Dionne. And that's precisely what the President appears to be doing, doubling down on the same government-driven solutions that have kept the private sector mired in what some are calling the worst economy ever. These folks have so much faith in government that they seem blind to any failure or excess. And they make no distinction between the things government's done well in the past and things it doesn't do well now. They have no limiting principle whatsoever. This is their logic. If you like the Hoover Dam, you should support bureaucrats making higher salaries and better benefits than the taxpayers who are paying for them. If you like the Intercontinental Railroad, you should support a $1 trillion stimulus bill that has been more effective at creating punchlines for late-night comedians than it has at creating jobs. If you like the GI Bill, they believe you must also embrace a debt-to-GDP ratio that makes us look like Greece. These folks seem to have no limiting principle whatsoever when it comes to the growth of government. They've got blind faith in it. It's the only thing they ever seem to want. And they're completely out of touch. The President wants you to believe that the reason we're in this economic slump is because states and local governments have been laying off government workers. But what he doesn't tell you, and what the American people won't hear him say tomorrow, is that since the recession began, for every government worker who has lost a job, 11 private sector jobs have been lost. For every government worker who has lost a job, 11 private sector jobs have been lost. And another thing you won't hear the President say is that the public sector unemployment is just over 4%. Unemployment among public workers, just over 4%, while all other private sector industries are at least twice that. So government employment, Madam President, isn't the problem. It's the private sector that is suffering, and it's the private sector where we need to focus our policies. So the battle lines are clear. After 3.5 years of failures, Democrats in Washington have one suggestion: more of the same. The President can repackage it however he wants tomorrow, but that's what it amounts to: more government, more debt, and fewer jobs. And that's not what Americans want. Now, Republicans have refused to go along with this approach and will continue to oppose it until the Democrats recognize what most Americans already seem to know. Government isn't the answer to what ails us. Government isn't the answer to what ails us. It doesn't mean government doesn't do some things well. It means government has its limits. And we've reached them. I saw a storyline this week about a high school in Utah. It said the school's been fined $15,000 for selling carbonated drinks. A school has been fined $15,000 for selling carbonated drinks. Why? Because federal nutrition guidelines say the school can't sell sugary drinks during lunch hour. A student could buy them before lunch and drink them during lunch, but it can't buy them during lunch and drink them during lunch. The government won't allow it. Now, Madam President, we're not talking about the Intercontinental Railroad here. We're talking about a government that has no sense of its own limits under the Constitution. And a president who doesn't seem willing to embrace anything that doesn't start and end with a government bureaucrat calling the shots. It's time for a change. And here's what I would suggest. One, the Democrat-led Senate should pass a budget. Hadn't done so in 3 years. Two, the Senate should take up the 28 job-related bills House Republicans passed that are collecting dust over here on the Majority Leader's desk. Three, we should pass comprehensive tax reform. And four, entitlement reform. This nation will not be able to get out from under the mountain of debt we've got without addressing the out-of-control spending related to these programs. They're simply unsustainable. But as I said yesterday, without presidential leadership, it simply can't happen. The same failed policies are not going to cut it. The only question is whether Democrats in Washington are capable of seeing that. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Senator from California. What is the Speaker's situation? Do I have some time now to respond to the Minority Leader, Republican Leader?
Currently, the time is under control of the Republican leader for the next 27 minutes.
Okay. I would ask if I could have 2 minutes just to respond to my friend.
Are we?
Yes.
I suggest the Senator from California use the Democratic time and
Without objection.
the time on this side be reserved.
Without objection.
I would ask that I be allowed to speak on the Democratic side's time for up to 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you. I thank the Republican leader. You know, it just stuns me when the Republican leader comes to the floor and has his blame Obama moment, you know, every day that he can. And I thought this one was really over the top. It's as if President Obama came in and everything was great and suddenly things are not going well. Excuse me, I was here, I know. I remember when we had surpluses under Bill Clinton and the Democrats and the Republicans turned it into deficits as far as the eye could see. I can't forget that because I remember a time, Madam President, when there was discussion about whether we really were going to even have U.S. treasuries anymore because we weren't going to have debt anymore when Bill Clinton was president, and the Democrats set us on that right course. We had a balance between investments in our people and fair taxes so that the top 1% paid a fair share, and everybody did well. 23 million new jobs were created with Bill Clinton. Then George W. comes in, 2 wars go on the credit card, tax breaks to the wealthiest few, the millionaires and billionaires, on the credit card, and suddenly we have a crisis, no regulation of these sophisticated securities. My friend in the chair knows well what happened. No oversight, derivatives, new kinds of securities, taking a beautiful home ownership ethic we had in this country and gambling on it. And what happened? The worst crisis since the Great Depression. And who comes into office? President Obama takes the oath, and the unbelievable crisis that he inherited and the unbelievable debt that he inherited and the unbelievable budget deficit that he inherited was just unbelievable. An auto industry going to be gone. Well, my friend, Senator McConnell, has a right to his opinion, and I respect it so much, except he avoids telling the facts about how we got where we are. And the American people do not suffer from amnesia. They understand this. They saw this president, this young president, come in, faced with jobs bleeding 800,000 a month. And yes, he turned it around. And yes, he did, in fact, promote a rescue of the auto industry. We would have been the only great economy that didn't have one if it wasn't for his courage. And yeah, a couple of courageous votes on the Republican side joining with Democrats. Good, that was a good moment. And yes, as Mitt Romney said, oh yeah, they could have gone busto, bankrupt. We didn't feel that way here. President didn't feel that way. So all of this Obama bashing on the floor of the Senate is going to continue because Senator McConnell is a very straightforward person, and he said, and I quote, not the exact words, the sentiment, close to the exact words, defeating President Obama is the highest priority of the Republicans. And you are seeing that play out on this floor. And I pledged that I would come here when I could to straighten out the record. So let's be clear. This president took over in the worst of times since the Great Depression. There have been millions of jobs created, not enough. And I will say this. If this economy sputters, this economic recovery that we're in sputters and has a hard time because of the depth of the crisis originally, the fact that the housing crisis still continues, the fact that there's problems in the global marketplace in Europe, and all of these factors, I want to say this. I want the person in the Oval Office to be a person who understands what's happening, and that's President Obama, who relates to working people, who relates to the middle class, who's not building an elevator for his 9 cars in San Diego. And that's how I feel. And every time there's an attack on this president, I'm going to come down here and tell the truth to the American people. Thank you, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President, Madam President.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, I have heard the remarks from my colleague in California, and I just can't let the record stand that President Obama took over in the worst circumstances of our time. Really. The debt of this country was around $10 billion, $1 trillion when President Obama took office. In just 3.5 years, that debt has almost doubled. We're at $16 trillion and hitting the ceiling in just 3.5 years. We are in a debt crisis not from the previous administration. We are in a debt crisis because we are spending too much, we're borrowing too much, and the President keeps talking about more taxes. Madam President, just last Friday, the President came out and said the private sector is doing just fine. It's government that's in a crisis. Well, yeah, government's in a crisis. The private sector is not doing just fine, and the government crisis is not caused because we're losing government jobs. The government crisis is caused because we're spending too much, and we are going into debt that is unsustainable in this country. For the millions of Americans who are out of work in this country, the President's assessment of the private sector must be like salt poured in a wound. My goodness. We have seen job numbers over 8% unemployment since the President took office. And the last 3 months have been not so good. We're still over 8%, and we went up a little bit to 8.2% in May. So the 13 million Americans who are unemployed and the millions more who are underemployed or have left the labor force altogether because they just have lost hope, Mr. President, things are not fine and the private sector is not fine in this country. And the middle class is bearing the brunt. On top of the unemployment rate, for those who are really in poverty conditions, the people who hold jobs are also losing ground. On Monday, the Federal Reserve reported that the median net worth of American families fell 39%. Between 2007 and 2010, we haven't seen these levels since 1992. During the same period, incomes also dropped sharply. Average household income fell 11% to $78,500, down from $88,300. The hardest hit? Families in the rapidly diminishing middle class. While these statistics are troubling, there is a concern that cannot be measured in dollars and cents, and that is that families are losing faith in a secure future. There was a time when every generation had a better quality of life and expected a better quality of life for their children than their parents had. That is not the case today. In 2010, 35% of families said they did not have a good idea of what their income would be just for the next year. That was 31% in 2007, 35% now. So the numbers of families that are just losing the faith that their children are going to have a better life than they have had is diminishing. And how could they be confident? The job creators in the private sector are the ones under siege. I cannot believe the President of the United States is so off base as to say the private sector is doing fine. Just this week, the National Federation of Independent Business released its monthly survey of small business optimism. Survey results continue to be historically low and consistent with the subpar performance of gross domestic product. According to this survey, levels of hiring and spending remained depressed in May, we all know that, and more importantly, so did plans for the future. The same report states that expectations for increasing future sales continued to be weak in May, far below readings recorded in any other similar period since 1973. Many small business owners are reluctant to expand their businesses or hire more workers. Small business owners who expect the economy to further deteriorate outnumber those who think there will be an improvement. Madam President, small businesses are our nation's primary job creators. Small businesses provide 55% of all jobs in the private sector. Small business has created 2 of every 3 net jobs in the United States since the early 1970s. So I would say to the President of the United States, it is small business that is the economic engine of America, not government. That is the fundamental disagreement that we have with this administration. We must spur the private sector to create income, growth, and security in this country. The private sector is not doing fine. So what should we be doing? To help Americans get back to work, we need to address what is causing the uncertainty. Why are businesses not hiring? Because government spending that serves to crowd out the private sector is increasing. There are tax increases being talked about by the President constantly, so they are looking at looming tax increases, burdensome regulations that they see coming by the piles like this out of the United States Government Federal Registry, and those regulations hamper job growth in this country. Then on top of all that, on top of the talk of new taxes, on top of the burdensome regulations that our small businesses face every day in bigger numbers every day, it's the health care law that was passed 2 years ago this December. If we want people to be hired, we cannot saddle our entrepreneurs and small businesses with new taxes, more regulations, and the cost, the overwhelming burden of the Obama health care plan. President Obama, in an interview yesterday, dismissed questions from a small business owner about the negative impact of the health care law and what it's already doing to small businesses. Now, anybody who has paid their part of insurance, if they're lucky enough to be covered, knows that the premiums have increased and the coverage has decreased in anticipation of the Obama health care law, adding the new burdens and costs on insurance companies, hospitals, doctors. The costs of doing business in health care are increasing in anticipation of that health care law taking full effect in the next year. I have heard so much opposition in my home state when I travel around from small businesses that are just throwing up their hands and saying, I cannot provide the government-approved health care for my employees, which is going to mean I will have a new tax burden for every one of them as they then have to go on the government plan and fend for themselves. Even families are going to have to do it, or they will have to pay a tax. And it's not just a good plan. It's the government-approved plan. So if you provide 35% of your employees' premiums, which is what you can afford, but the government requires 40%, you still have to pay the fine. So small businesses are saying, I'm just going to pay the fine because that's my only alternative. And if you have 50 or more employees, there will be costly new federal regulations to comply with, and the financial penalty is so great that we're seeing businesses stop at 49 so that they will not have to hire more workers and therefore have a bigger responsibility. I received a letter from a small business owner in Arlington who said it best. Did Congress and the President know they were going to freeze our country's businesses' ability to help grow this economy when they passed this bill? Now, I will point out that not one Republican in the House or Senate voted for this bill in Congress. So I would have to say to my small business constituent in Arlington, this was the Democrats in Congress and the President's bill. Not one Republican would support it because of the fear of exactly what's happening, and that is small business owners are losing faith that they will be able to grow, and that's what's causing the economic crisis that we're in with unemployment over 8%. A small business owner in Corpus Christi, Texas, who has 34 employees, told my office recently that his company's cheapest option for health insurance would boost premiums by 44% over last year. Madam President, how can they do it? It's happening everywhere. I hear it everywhere I go. Clearly, this is not the incentive our economy needs right now. We need government to get out of the way of the job creators in this country, not block their path with miles of regulations, new burdens and costs, new regulations, new costs, and then the talk of new taxes, which is prevalent everywhere. Our best hope is that the Supreme Court will see that this has a constitutional problem. And then we can start again and take a step-by-step reform that will do what all of us wanted to do. Everyone in Congress and the President I know had the same goal, and that is to have more Americans with affordable coverage and options. But, Madam President, that's not the bill that was passed, and it's why Republicans couldn't possibly support it, because they saw the burdens on families, on businesses, and they knew it was not going to encourage hiring, which is what we need in this country. You know, Madam President, we have a chance to start a process that will be positive. We need to do something to spur small business and this economy. One thing that could be done, which is in discussions right now, is the Keystone XL pipeline, which would create a $7 billion shovel-ready, privately funded project that would transport over 700,000 barrels of oil from Canada to the United States. It would create, it has been estimated, 20,000 construction jobs and as many as 100,000 jobs in the refineries and other businesses. And, oh, by the way, we'd be trading with a friendly partner, Canada, so that we wouldn't have to import more from unfriendly parts of the Middle East, and we would also be able to know that these are privately funded jobs, not one government cent. In fact, it would create taxes being paid to the government because people would be working, and that's the way we should be growing our revenue in this country. But the President suggests a different solution. He says the answer is not to spur the private sector because they're doing just fine. He says, let's spend more money bailing out the states because they're having a hard time. They are having a hard time. Madam President, we can do something for the states. And it's not bailing them out with more borrowed federal dollars that will continue to weigh down the dollar itself. No, we can do something for the state governments, and that is stop sending federal mandates that we don't pay for, that we require them to do. Put a moratorium on federal mandates on states today, and let's start repealing these federal mandates that we're requiring states to absorb, and it is killing their economies. Medicaid and the lack of flexibility in Medicaid is the biggest expense most states have because it's a federal mandate, unpaid for and unflexible, not the choices that states could make to cover the people that need the help. We can help the states, but not at the expense of our dollar and our debt. So the President is suggesting more spending and bailing out states, and we're offering a solution that says let's create jobs in the private sector. Keystone XL is ready to go right now. Private sector, 100,000 future jobs, not one penny of federal government. Let's take these federal regulations and let's just put a moratorium on more right now and free our small businesses to be the entrepreneurs that built this country. It is the entrepreneurs that built this country in freedom. This country has been a magnet for people coming from all over the world because they could do their research in freedom. They could grow in freedom. They could keep the fruits of their labor and give their kids a better chance than they had, which they couldn't get in their home countries. That's what built this country. And, Madam President, we can get right back there. But it's not by borrowing more, spending more, taxing more, and regulating our small businesses out of existence. Madam President, we can do something positive, and it's time that we got started. And I yield the floor.
Senator from Georgia.
How much time remains in the minority side?
Just 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that Taylor Ibrahim, an intern in Senator Paul's office, be granted floor privileges for the remainder of the day.
Without objection.
Madam President, I too want to rise and talk some about the President's statement of last Friday, but in maybe a different approach than you might imagine. The President said that he thought the private sector was doing just fine. I was driving in the car when I heard the statement. And the statement took me back because I feared the President might not actually know how the private sector really was doing. And I just 2 weeks ago spent a week on the road doing town halls, knocking on doors, visiting with Georgians. And so I come to the floor to provide some information to the President that maybe the private sector isn't doing that well. And maybe there's something we could do about it in this administration, in this Senate. Because right now we're doing nothing and America is languishing because of a lot of problems. Some of them are our making. But the private sector, by definition, is everybody other than the government sector. At least that's my definition. And so let me talk about everybody other than the government sector for just a minute and why they're not doing very well. Let me talk about the home builder that I met in Valdosta, Georgia, who talked to me about the fact that he had just sold a home he had built. And I said, well, that's great. House sales are getting better. He said, the only problem is I couldn't get an appraisal for what it cost me to build the house. So I'm selling it, but I'm selling it at a loss. And part of that's because of the regulation and impression that's on appraisers right now because of fear of appraisal fraud. Or the tomato farmer that I talked with in Bainbridge, Georgia, who talked about the indignation he had when the Labor Department in Washington promulgated a rule, did not end up passing it, that would have said you had to be 18 years or older to work on a farm, even if it was your family farm. An overreach of the Department of Labor that fortunately they pulled back, but the type of overreach that causes people to retrench, not build and expand and move their business forward. Or the 81-year-old community banker that I talked to yesterday on the phone from Calhoun, Georgia, who had a significant amount of his savings invested in the stock of the community bank that he'd been a part of for so much of his life. A community bank that's now under a cease and desist letter with the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation and being managed under what's called a cease and desist order, which means the FDIC is basically running the bank or limiting its parameters. And the bank is slowly but surely dissipating its capital base until it gets to 2%, and then the feds will come in and close the bank, will transfer its assets to a bigger bank, will give them an 80% loss share guarantee, and the bigger bank will foreclose on the property, sue, and move forward. In fact, what was intended by Dodd-Frank to reduce too big to fail and empower smaller banks has done the opposite. The bigger banks have gotten bigger, the smaller banks have become fewer, and American banking and capital investment is less. Or the hospital that I visited in Thomasville, Georgia, just finished its completion, the Archibald Center, a great center, but talking about the difficulties they were having with employees and the fear they had that the National Labor Relations Board mini-union ruling on specialty health care was actually going to become the law of the land through regulation, where micro units within a facility could actually unionize, where just nurses in the emergency room or just nurses in the ICU could unionize, everybody else would not. Can you imagine a hospital or a department store or a manufacturer with a union in the shoe department, a union in the nursing department, a union in the lumber department, a union on the loading dock, micro unions throughout the organization? You couldn't function. You couldn't cross-train. You couldn't manage. And you'd weight the playing field between management and labor in favor of labor and to the detriment of the investor who made the investment. And I could go on, but in those visits that I've talked about, the cities and the people that I've talked to in Georgia, people in the private sector, they're not doing well. And they're not for a fear of overregulation and a fear of uncertainty. If we could do anything to empower our economy in the short run, and the American people, we'd call time out. We'd say maybe enough's enough. As I told a member of the administration 2 weeks ago, you know, the administration, I think, wants to eliminate risk. Well, our job is not to eliminate risk, it's to mitigate risk. If you eliminate risk, you take the power of investment, the private sector, entrepreneurship, capital risk, you take it out of the window. You can't eliminate risk, but you can mitigate it. So let's get back to mitigating risk, making sure we have a safe workplace, but at least a workplace where capital investment can be made. Let's make sure we mitigate risk in banking, but not so much that we suppress and choke out the small family banker. And let's make sure that agricultural workers are safe, but the son of a farmer can work on his father's own farm. Let's make sure that we're not overreaching so far that we're making the private sector's plight worse than it already is today. So my message to the Senate and to the President of the United States is the private sector is not just fine. And though it may not all be of government's making, part of it's of government's making. And we're making it worse. We're trying to run a country that's based on the three-legged stool of legislative, judicial, and executive branch on a two-legged stool of regulation and through the executive branch and judicial regulation through the judicial branch, cutting out the legislative branch. You know what happens to two-legged stools? They fall over. The private sector is falling over, and it's in part or in whole because of us. So I hope the President will understand there is a private sector out there that pays the taxes, that makes America work, a private sector that is hurting, and a private sector that we could help. Let's put our nose to the grindstone, our shoulder to the grindstone. Let's move forward in these months leading up to the election. Let's change some of the overregulation. Let's change the paradigm. Let's empower the private sector, not just accept that we think it's doing just fine. And I end with this. The front page of USA Today. Average family wealth, net worth in the United States of America in the last 3 years declined 39.4%, back to the level of 1992, which very simply means the private sector has lost 20 years of accumulation, equity, and investment in the economy of the last 3 years. That's unacceptable. It's why we have the depression that we have in the country. We need to get our shoulder to the grindstone, make it work, empower the private sector, and once again let the private sector be just fine again because of empowerment of the private sector, entrepreneurship, and capital investment. And I yield balance of my time.
Madam President.
I yield my time.
Madam President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Madam President, first, just as a matter of logistics, I have 5 unanimous consent requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate with the approval of the majority and minority leaders, and I ask unanimous consent that these requests be agreed to and that these requests be printed in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Madam President. We are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, including yourself, the Senator from New York, on the floor today in the majority time to discuss the jammed bipartisan Senate highway bill. I just heard my wonderful colleague from Georgia talk about how we're doing nothing and America is languishing. Well, one of the things we're doing nothing on is passing a highway bill, which should not be complicated. But it is jammed up by the House Republicans. As a result, people in Rhode Island and elsewhere are suffering. And I will be here throughout our majority period. But let me, I think the distinguished senator from Minnesota and New Hampshire were here first, so let me yield to them for a few moments each.
Madam President,
Senator from Minnesota.
I first want to thank the Senator from Rhode Island for his leadership in bringing us all together today. We have to get this transportation bill done. This is a bill that passed the United States Senate with 74 votes. So we are here today to say to our colleagues over in the House and ask our colleagues on the Republican side to ask the Republicans in the House to get this bill done. Cold weather states like Minnesota, and for that matter New York, we say we have 2 seasons. We have winter and we have construction season. Well, this kind of delay can be crippling. We have a much smaller window of time to get these construction projects done. We have people waiting in traffic. So we ask the House, why are we making them wait? We look at the costs when we delay construction projects, the cost to taxpayers. Everyone knows if you wait too long to work on a project and you're doing something on your house and you wait years and years to get it done, the costs go up. So we ask our friends in the House, why are they allowing this to happen? Why are they making this delay? Look at contractors, construction workers, engineering firms. They need consistency. Why is the House making them wait? Look at Caterpillar, a business that employs 750 people in my state. They make road paving equipment, and they have a manufacturing facility. I was there dressing the employees. They gave me a pink hat. There's people working all over that company, and you know what? They want more jobs. They want to make things in America. They want to export to the world. We're not going to be able to export to the world if we don't have the roads and the bridges that can take our goods to market. So we ask the House of Representatives, why are we making these private employers wait? The bill makes critical reforms to our transportation policy. Just last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released a report announcing that 58% of high school seniors said they texted or emailed while driving in the previous month. 43% of high school juniors said they do the same thing. You know what this bill does? It includes provisions to help prevent texting while driving, incentives. You yourself, Madam President, the two of us together worked on the graduated driver's license standards that are in this. Why are we making the parents of America wait while their kids are out there texting while they're driving? It makes reforms, this bill, to our transportation policy, reduces the number of highway programs from over 100 to 30. So the Republicans in the House, how can they explain that they're making America wait to actually reform and make these programs less duplicative? It defines clear national goals for transportation policy. It streamlines environmental permitting. Why would you make America wait? Why? That's what we're asking the House of Representatives today. And no one knows better than Minnesota what happens if you neglect your roads and bridges. 35W Bridge crashes down in the middle of a river 6 blocks from my house. So we ask the House of Representatives, why are you making the people of America wait? Thank you, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from New Hampshire.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm pleased to be here to join my colleagues in talking about why it's so important to pass this transportation bill. And I thank Senator Whitehouse for his efforts in organizing us. You know, in New Hampshire, we understand what Senator Klobuchar was saying about the importance of getting this bill passed so we can get our construction season underway, because we have a limited amount of time. But in only 17 days, this nation's surface transportation programs are going to shut down unless Congress acts to reauthorize them. In March, nearly 3/4 of this Senate voted to pass a bipartisan, long-term transportation bill that maintains current funding levels and avoids an increase in both the deficit and in gas taxes. This legislation is important as we look at roads and bridges and mass transit that are going to be have support. It's important as we look at the jobs in the construction industry and manufacturing businesses that depend on our transportation system. In fact, the Federal Highway Administration estimates that for every $1 billion in highway spending that we support about 27,000 jobs. I was really pleased last week to see an overwhelming bipartisan majority in the House vote to reject policies that would cut spending on roads and public transit by 1/3. If that had passed, an estimated 2,000 New Hampshire jobs would have been lost. I think that vote sends an important signal to members of the conference committee that a strong bipartisan majority in both houses of Congress should support funding for crucial investments in our transportation network. And I call on the House to work with the Senate in a similar bipartisan manner as we did in the Senate to pass transportation policies that put Americans back to work and that generate economic growth. We've seen it in New Hampshire, where we've got 29 construction projects that are going to be on hold if we can't get transportation legislation passed here. We've seen it with Interstate 93, one of our main corridors going up and down the middle of our state, which has been delayed because of the delay in passing this transportation bill. If we're unable to set aside election year amendments, we're unable to set aside this partisan politics and come together to do what's right for our country and our economy and pass a transportation bill, it will be putting this country in a very difficult situation. The Congressional Budget Office has projected that the Highway Trust Fund will run out of money next year, sometime in 2013. We're not exactly sure when, but that will mean funding to states will face drastic cuts without any reauthorization to shore up that revenue. And were the Highway Trust Fund to run out of money, projects across this country would grind to a halt. It would decimate jobs in the construction industry. We can't afford that. Investing in transportation creates jobs, and it creates the conditions for our small companies to succeed. It should not be an issue about politics or partisanship. I urge our colleagues on the House side, because they're the ones who are holding this up, to come together and to pass a transportation reauthorization bill. Thank you very much, Madam President. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Maryland.
Madam President, thank you very much. I want to join Senator Shaheen and join Senator Klobuchar and particularly thank Senator Whitehouse for bringing us together. I know Senator Boxer was on the floor a little bit earlier talking about the Transportation Conference Committee. Senator Begich is here. We're all here because of the urgency of the conference report being presented to us so that we have a multi-year reauthorization of the surface transportation programs of this country. And, Madam President, let me just point out, I know a lot of times our constituents are confused as to why legislation cannot move here, but clearly the holdup in passing the surface transportation reauthorization are the Republicans in the House of Representatives. They are blocking a bill that has broad support from the industries that are affected by it, from the public, and from both Democrats and Republicans here in the Senate. We passed a consensus bill. It's not even bipartisan, it's consensus. We were able to get the right balance between public transportation, transit, and highways and bridges. We had the proper balance between how the money is controlled at the state level and how it's controlled at the local level. We've worked out a reform of our transportation programs to do this in the most efficient way. It's being held up for one reason and one reason alone, and that is the politics of the House of Representatives Republicans. They believe they can score political points by blocking any legislation from moving. But let me just underscore the points that my colleagues have mentioned. This bill is all about jobs. It's all about rebuilding America and saving and preserving jobs. On Sunday, I was in Cumberland, Maryland, talking about the first federal highway, the national highway that was built over 200 years ago, which was the first subsidized road in America. That brought jobs to our community, connected the East with the expanding nation. Well, quite frankly, this transportation bill connects our nation, and it's important for jobs. In the western part of Maryland, we have the Appalachia Highway that we need to complete, the North-South Highway, that will affect jobs in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia. That's what's about here. A short-term extension cost us jobs. Last month, we lost 28,000 jobs as a result of not being able to pass a multi-year surface transportation program. We lose the construction seasons, as my colleagues have pointed out. And quite frankly, we have the bill before us. We have the votes to pass it. So what we're asking today, we're asking that the Republicans in the House release this bill, allow us to move forward so that we can create the jobs for America and the economic expansion for America that we need in modern transportation. That's what this is about, and that's why we are here today, to urge our colleagues, the Republicans in the House, the extremists that are holding up this bill. This is a bill that's important for our nation. Let's move forward with the people's business. And with that, Madam President, I would yield the floor.
Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, thank you very much, and to my colleagues, thanks for coming to the floor. To Senator